All right, my friends, it's time for another crypto Q&A where we answer your questions on the show after crypto over coffee. So, grab yourself a coffee, pour yourself a nice cup of joe, and hang out with me. I'm going to answer your questions. To start things off, make sure you are subscribed and you're following me on Twitter at Hashoshi4, where you can ask me questions for future shows. The first question is from Dan Y. Devi TT0. Danny, thank you for your question. Why didn't the fall of Genesis Global, into bankruptcy dent the market at all? So why didn't the fall of Genesis dent the crypto market? And also, have you watched the World Economic Forum news lately? So there's two questions here. Let's start with the first one. The first question is, why didn't the fall of Genesis Global into bankruptcy dent the crypto market? I think that we are kind of at the point where we have reached bear market fatigue. We have sentiment at all-time lows. The people who are going to sell crypto have pretty much already sold crypto. And a lot of people during this rally are buying back in right now. So this could be a lagging indicator. Let me just put it this way. Genesis Global falling into bankruptcy was predictable. We kind of knew it was going to happen. What we don't know is the breadth or the depth of what's going to happen as a result of Genesis Global's bankruptcy. We're going to find out a lot more details as things get submitted to the bankruptcy court. Is Digital Currency Group itself going to falter and fail? What effect does that have on Grayscale and their GBTC product? What effects does that have on other companies like Gemini? Will there be more bankruptcies as a result of this? Will the contagion continue? Those are the things that we need to be watching for. And so while the market hasn't been dented by this right now, I think it's because a lot of people, are clinging to resurgence to a bull market. People are sick of being in a bear market. They want price action. We're getting some positive movement. And so we're kind of leaning into that. Traders will often do that. Retail will often do that. You also have a lot of people who have moved their crypto off of exchanges into cold storage throughout all this exchange hoo-ha. And so therefore now you have a lot of people who may not really want to go through the whole rigmarole of selling their crypto. So we're going to have to see what happens as this crypto rally unfolds. Will there be a big sell wall that we hit sooner or later when you start to see people like whales maybe taking profits, or people who bought in throughout the downturn in the $15,000 range starting to take profits here at the $21,000, $22,000, $25,000 mark? Then we could start to see what's going on. But Genesis Global, that situation is far from resolved, but the initial news of going into bankruptcy didn't dent the market because of all the reasons I mentioned before, but also because it was just predictable. We knew this was going to happen. There's no way they were going to raise $1 billion to stay above water, and so we knew that this bankruptcy was going to happen. And have I watched the World Economic Forum news lately? So I don't really watch the World Economic Forum stuff because it just makes me angry a lot of the time, and I don't think that's healthy for me. But what I will say is, very seldom do I see something in the World Economic Forum that I agree with. Very seldom do I think that it is healthy, though, for all the fixation people have on the hatred towards World Economic Forum, because rather than focusing on ideology that you don't agree with, work to build towards the ones that you do, towards the ideas that you do. And so I don't think it's super healthy to focus so squarely on what the World Economic Forum is doing or saying, or what people are saying there. I don't really enjoy the idea that unelected officials and elected officials are moving, kind of mingling together to try and decide what the future looks like. The people should be the one who decide what the future looks like. That's actually all I'm going to say on the matter, because it just gets to the point where it's fatiguing to realize that people think that you need to ban meat and gas stoves and eat crickets to save the world, when that's not at all the case. There's a lot of things that can be done. Good, clean energy, it's available, it can be done, it can be produced. There are ways to supply good, clean food and water to people who don't have it. There are plenty of things that we could do to improve the world that we're not doing, and it really frustrates me when we go through this whole process of ideating on state surveillance and eating crickets and all this stuff when it just doesn't seem to be what we need to do to solve the problem, and it's more work than it actually needs to be. Anyways, not going to go too much deeper into that whole thing, but you know my feelings on that. I haven't really been watching. Don't really feel like I'm going to watch. All right, we got another question from Macro, Birdie, Camel. Glad that you're having a great time with the little one. Yes, I did have a baby. Thank you very much. Given the macroeconomic conditions, is it fair to consider that although fundamentals in crypto are looking bullish, we're still headed for possible unexpected down pressure. Now, I don't think that this is unexpected down pressure. I think that right now, like I mentioned in the first question's answer, we are in a place where people are so fatigued of the bear market. We're so fatigued of bad news with FTX and Three Arrows Capital and Genesis Global and DCG. Everything seems to be a disaster. We've kind of hit sentiment bottom, max fear, max pain for at the time being. The problem that I have with people saying, okay, well, we've already hit all those markers, bear market's over. First of all, people are using data from 2019 and other past cycles to tell us where we are going and what's going to happen. The problem is we are in a completely different environment economically, sociopolitically, than we were back then. We had the last, God knows how long of just quantitative easing, rate cutting, risk on environments. All the markets, including the equities markets, were just up, 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 up. You just couldn't lose in many cases. And the reality is that environment, especially for crypto, where equities are doing great, traditional markets are doing great, we're still very correlated to that market. We are a sub $1 trillion asset class still, folks, across crypto. We're very small and we're still very correlated to the stock market. In the fullness of time, yeah, you can zoom in and find, oh, look, we're uncorrelated for like a day. Doesn't really work long term. So until we are uncorrelated and maybe Bitcoin starts to depeg a little bit from traditional markets, we shall see. But until then, we can't be saying, oh, bear market's over, because I don't think the traditional markets have seen the bottom yet. I think we are still going to enter into a heavy recession. We're technically already in one, but we're going to be in an even heavier recession because the wheels are going to fall off after all the rate hiking that's been going on. The Fed and central banks around the world only have a couple of choices. They have to move the seesaw in one direction or the other, and that is they're going to have to hike rates to bring inflation to heal. And then what that's inevitably going to do is it's going to crash the economy. You're going to continue to see layoffs. You're already seeing them happen. You're going to see layoffs and cost cutting in banking and financial services. You're already seeing that. Goldman Sachs is chopping staff. You're going to start to see more and more and more of this. And as the layoffs continue, you start to see people faltering on earnings and income, and individual families are going to start to struggle. Ultimately, that's what brings inflation down, is all of this sort of economic turmoil. And so I think we're going to have to get there. And so this whole idea of a soft landing doesn't seem likely to me. And as a result, because of that, I don't think that risk assets, of which crypto are the riskiest of all, are going to see a ton of influx from retail or from institutions. Not to mention the regulatory radioactivity that there is in crypto right now. Institutions are not going to want to touch crypto for a while because of FTX and all the stuff that's going on. There's no regulatory clarity. Banks are stepping away from crypto. Swift is reportedly stepping away from crypto and trying to make it harder. There was a time where you couldn't even transfer crypto from Coinbase to your bank account without getting your funds frozen and having to go through a whole song and dance to get them back. We could be going back there now. So I don't think we're going to a bull market. I think there's downtrend still to come. We may have a nice little rally here up to $30,000 like we talked about in Crypto Over Coffee. I don't think it lasts. I think we still have at least another touch of the bottom of 15,500 for Bitcoin and the rest of the markets to follow, or maybe even new lows if things get really ugly in the macroeconomic picture. So people say, oh, Bitcoin doesn't care about macro. It does. And history tells us it does. Even the last year tells us it does. So if you start to see the Fed talking aggressively, you see a 50 basis point rate hike, or you see a higher rate hike, or inflation ekes back up a little bit and reverses on the downtrend, it could get very ugly. That's my philosophy. You're free to disagree. Let me know in the comments why you disagree if you do. Next question is from Rune Aiden. Nice Canadian flag there, fella. Awesome. Now that Blockfolio and FTX is no longer working, can you recommend an alternative? And so this is an alternative portfolio manager. If you're looking for an alternative exchange, I don't really want to make exchange recommendations, to be honest with you. I don't love exchanges in general, and there's so many different ones, regions, like regionally. So even though I could assume you're from Canada or you're in Canada, I don't want to give you an exchange recommendation. But if you want one, send me a private message and we can talk about it. A DM on Twitter is fine. Okay, so I can recommend an alternative for portfolio manager. Ironically enough, the one I was going to recommend, the one that I've used for a while, did reply to this tweet, and that's Delta. So Delta Investment Tracker. The app is pretty solid. It's well designed. I've always liked Delta. Let's see, what was the other one? I think there's another one that I have on here. I'm on my phone right now, so I'm going to check. CoinStats is another one that I've used. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So you could explore CoinStats as well. So Delta, CoinStats, and then to be honest with you, CoinTracker, which I've talked about for crypto taxes, they have a really good portfolio management arm of their business, and I think that the application is great. It gives you tax loss harvesting advice, or data, I guess. They don't want to call it advice, but CoinTracker is also really cool. So I'll leave links to all these things in the description below if you're interested in checking those portfolio managers out. Really, it's personal preference. Try them out, test them out. Make sure you read the privacy policy and make sure you adhere to strict security guidelines along the way. Keep your private keys and all that sort of stuff nice, safe, and secure. Most of them just take addresses, but just want you to know. All right. Next question is from Taken Username 98. From a maxi standpoint, why is blockchain only valid for Bitcoin? Okay, so from a maximalist standpoint, a Bitcoin maximalist standpoint, I think their issue is not that blockchain technology is only useful for Bitcoin. I think their real argument is that Bitcoin is the only asset that is provably and fairly distributed. So there was no ICO, there was no pre-mine, there was no distribution. And you know what? They have a point. The issuance that happened through mining, sure, the first few folks, the Hal Finneys of the world, Satoshi Nakamoto, all those early dudes, they got Bitcoin on the cheap because they were the right place, right time. They identified it. They knew what they were trying to do. They were building in that space. So that's not a distribution. They were actually contributing. And of course, then they got something in return. Now, the problem that I have with the maximalist viewpoint, while I agree with some of the fundamental principles, which is Bitcoin has a provable fixed supply, and despite the critics, it is not easy to change the Bitcoin supply, and miners cannot unilaterally do so either, by the way. But regardless of all of that, I still think the maximalist view is flawed because not everything is built for the same purpose that Bitcoin is. And if you think about Bitcoin's purpose, it's to serve as a sort of sovereign currency alternative, a stable, safe haven asset that is provably secure, that is non-state affiliated, and that is also economically sound. You know the rate of inflation, you know the issuance, and you know the fixed supply. Ultimately, though, other blockchains are not trying to do that. Other blockchains are not trying to solve for a digital store of value as a core value prop or core principle or core reason for existence. Even Ethereum is not trying to do that. Ethereum is trying to do something completely different. And so while Bitcoin may tackle store of value, payments, value, security, and all sorts of stuff like that, Ethereum is going to be a computational platform. You're going to have rollups processing transactions with complex business logic executed or expressed in code. You're going to have other blockchains that do the same thing, and they may extract value, or Bitcoin may be sort of the bank for these different blockchains that are out there, the Cosmos of the world, the Ethereums of the world, and all their layer 2s. But Bitcoin is not going to be the only blockchain that exists. And the technology is not isolated to that one specific use case. And while Bitcoin has an undeniable value prop, and I respect that, and of course, there's a reason why Bitcoin's a huge proportion of my net worth, but I still don't believe that is the only thing in the world that matters and is the only thing in the world that has any value. 99% of crypto is garbage, but there's 1% that exists that is not just Bitcoin that is valuable and that will have an impact in the future. Thank you for your question. And I got another question here. Can you explain what an EVM is and the role in projects like Polkadot and Cosmos? So an EVM, it's an Ethereum virtual machine. An EVM blockchain is a blockchain that uses the Ethereum virtual machine, which is really an open source execution environment for smart contract code written in languages like Solidity. So Solidity is like the industry standard smart contract programming language or scripting language. What the EVM does is it basically takes the outputs of that code, that high-level language you're writing in Solidity, And it's basically translating those outputs into opcodes, or basically instructions as to where to store data, how to process data. It basically executes set of functions behind the scenes, or operations behind the scenes, that determines what gets written to the blockchain, the inputs and outputs, and all that sort of stuff. It is the heartbeat of, or the brain of smart contracts for many different blockchains, starting with Ethereum. So EVM compatibility is often something that projects tout as a value add, because it means that you can take smart contracts written on Ethereum in Solidity, and you can port them over. And that's why you have Phantom and Avalanche and BSC or Binance or BNB chain, whatever it's called these days. You have a bunch of roll-ups that have been targeting full EVM parity. It's a thing that people try and achieve because they want to ease the transition for smart contract developers that exist already, that have Ethereum experience, to be able to build things in your ecosystem. So for Polkadot and Cosmos and these interoperability projects, it's important because it will help them bring developers into the ecosystem. And so you'll see, and you already see, for example, in Cosmos, EVM compatible app chains, or basically blockchains built using the Cosmos SDK that connect to the broader Cosmos networks or network structure. And they are EVM compatible. Therefore, they can execute smart contracts using Solidity. You're going to see almost every project start and then introduce some level of EVM compatibility because it makes sense to do so for uptake. The problem is that people use this as a crutch. You see it in a lot of places. We want developers to build things, so we're just going to make it EVM compatible. And then you just have this boring, flat, homogeneous application environment in every new blockchain. There's nothing that differentiates you anymore. And that's the big thing that I have an issue with. And people are just recreating or trying to recreate Uniswap and Compound and all this other stuff on other blockchains. High potential, lots of different design decisions that were made to make it unique, and people are not using those yet to their fullest potential. And you can see that in every other blockchain. I would argue every single other blockchain network right now is not using its own unique value proposition and design decisions to its fullest because it's leaning on recreating things that worked on Ethereum. Simple as that. That's my view. So it is going to be important in the future because it's going to allow developers to build things in different ecosystems more easily. You want to have some standardization of languages to an extent, but I still think that people should not lean so heavily on EVM compatibility, especially outside of the ones that need it, like layer 2s and rollups for Ethereum itself. So that's my view on it. People may be annoyed because they're like, oh, I thought it was really good to have. It is, but there are limitations to it. So I wouldn't say EVM compatibility is something that we should celebrate and applaud for a new blockchain, because it's almost like just a thing that you do to check a box. All right. And I think I have a couple of rapid fire goofy questions people asked. How much sleep are you getting is a question from the eccentric owl. None. My kid is up probably every hour, maybe 2 hours if we're lucky. Sometimes doesn't really sleep much at all. So I'm not really sleeping a whole lot at all, but that will end up going away in the future. It's the first month and a half, so it's par for the course. And then another question, do you wet the toothbrush before applying toothpaste, after, or no water? If you are a no water toothbrusher, you're insane, man. There's no way on earth that brushing your teeth without water is either A, effective, or B, pleasant. So I am a wet the toothbrush before applying the toothpaste. It's just the superior method. So if you'd like to advocate for no water, please, I would love to see why you say that's effective. And wetting the toothbrush after, I could see the argument there. I just don't do it that direction. So thank you for the funny question. That was from Steph OS with lots of numbers at the end. But that's going to do it for Crypto Over Coffee Q&A today, folks. Hope you had a good time listening to my ramblings on these different topics. And until next week, hopefully I will be able to make a video, but please bear with me due to the little baby that I've got to take care of. Thank you so much for supporting the show. As always, I will be back to more regularly scheduled content as soon as I possibly can. Thank you so much. And until next time, cheers.